Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Play Therapy Circle. I'm Kylie Ellison, a therapist, clinical supervisor, and play therapy trainer, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is a space for thoughtful, soulful conversations about child-centered therapy, play-based work, and what it means to show up with presence and compassion, both for our clients and for ourselves. Whether you're a seasoned play therapist, a student just starting out, or someone deeply passionate about working with children, you belong here. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Play Therapy Circle podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ellison, and I am so glad you are here. Welcome back, guys. It's another episode. It's our second episode in the recording studio. For those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see now I have a mic stand. And I'm not sold on it yet. So if it doesn't appear in the next episode, it's because it was annoying me. So I'm still working out how to put myself in picture and to have all of the things and be able to do the podcast. So thank you all for your patience. Thank you everyone who has checked out our YouTube videos so far. We will pop this one up this week as well. And for those of you listening at home or listening on your Apple podcast or Spotify, thank you also for your incredible support. We are now being listened to in 25 countries. So not just Australia, where I live, but across the globe. So we are so incredibly thankful to all of the support from everyone listening. So keep listening. We love it when you are following along with us. So I'm hoping you guys are finding this useful and helpful for your practice. So it is a couple of days before Halloween here in Australia. Halloween has been one of those things where it's grown, I guess, in popularity over, recent years, I guess, where it wasn't historically so in Australia. So I know lots of kids are looking forward to trick-or-treating on Friday night. And then we get into the 1st of November. So if anyone is feeling like I am right now of what is happening? Where is the year going? And am I okay? It's been a very big year, so I think we're all ready for some downtime and some recharge time because that's always very important for our own mental health. So definitely feeling it this week, you guys. Just feeling a little tired. Trying to get through. We're almost there. The weekend's in sight. And yes, I will be putting up my Christmas tree on the 1st of November. Yep, I am that person, and unapologetically so. I'm ready. I'm ready for Christmas to come. So if you are putting up your tree on the 1st of November, I see you. And I support you. You have my blessing. All right. This is an extension. I actually decided to make this part 3 of our parent consultation episodes because, look, we could talk for days about this. And so it's really hard to kind of put it into a short podcast episode for people to listen to. So I think it's really important to caveat all of this to say that getting training in conducting parent consultations in CCPT is always important, but additionally then talking to your clinical supervisor, getting that regular supervision, self-reflection and peer support is also very handy. So this is just another tool in your toolkit to listen to this podcast and add to the information you already have. So this episode I wanted to talk about specifically communicating updates to parents. I think that's one of the things that practitioners certainly feel challenged with in that space of how much detail do I go into, how do I do that, and a pathway to follow. So this is something for beginning play therapists that you would be navigating now, but even for those seasoned play therapists listening as well. I know that it's a challenge at times to be able to do that and to communicate progress without breaching that confidentiality of that relationship with the child. So there's a lot for us to unpack and consider here. So I definitely want to talk about the frameworks. I want to talk about those communication strategies and how we go about communicating feedback to parents. So definitely, I hope that this is a topic that will be useful in your work. That's certainly my goal. So what I want to start the conversation on is obviously reiterating our values and principles under CCPT. So there is certainly things for us to consider around respecting the child's process, their privacy, and their self-direction. I always say that as a child therapist, it's far more complex in some ways, not always, but in some ways, when we come to this topic of communicating feedback, in comparison to, say, adult clients where the client is the adult. Typically, I guess, in that space. Whereas when we are working in child-centered play therapy, we have both the child as the client and the parent or guardian. So we constantly navigate that dynamic and those dual relationships. So why is confidentiality important? Certainly in the work that we do with children, it's very much around supporting safety, autonomy, and the capacity for the child to feel that sense of safety and trust to emotionally share those experiences and feelings. So we really work very hard, especially in the beginning, and we've talked about that in previous episodes around the stages of play. That exploratory stage is not only for the child to explore the room, but to explore the nature of the relationship and the nature of the playroom. And the fact that for us, it's so important that that child feels a sense of safety. So we are very conscious of that when we're then meeting with parents. So I think it's very normal, I guess, and typical for parents to want to know what's happening. They have generally speaking, they have a natural curiosity about what happens in the playroom. And so when you're doing those parent consult updates, it's very common for parents to ask exactly what's kind of happening in there. But it's also important for parents to know if progress is occurring, if there's been changes, and what's happening for their child. So that's all very common expectations from the parent's perspective. So it's certainly an internal tension for us as play therapists to want to reassure the parent whilst also keeping that privacy and confidentiality for the child. So we live in this kind of dilemma of supporting both parties. So definitely miscommunication or oversharing can unintentionally occur in the work that you're doing. And I think it's really important that we emphasize, especially in the beginning, that you are learning, and it's important for us to abide by our ethical practice guidelines for our professional association, right? And keeping in line with our framework of CCPT. But I often say to beginning supervisees, if they feel like they have overshared and spoken about the detail in the play, when they felt that pressure from parents to give examples or to give a more clearer understanding, I guess, from their perspective, from the parent's perspective of what's happening, I often say and lean into the fact that in times of stress, we know from the research, in times of stress, we revert back to what we know. So if you feel like you need to lean into giving specifics, that's probably an indicator of you as the therapist feeling a little bit out of your comfort zone or feeling kind of on the spot. And so taking a minute to regulate yourself, go back to your plan, which we're going to talk about in terms of strategies to navigate this, is really important in those moments, but also to take that experience as a learning to carry into your next parent consult with any other clients that you're working with, that you have that experience of that happening and you say, okay, what can potentially be the steps I take for next time so that that doesn't necessarily happen. So I think it's all part of our growth and learning as therapists too. So it's important for us to do that self-reflection, talk in supervision, and have a plan for next time. So it's definitely what I want to reiterate is communicating updates to parents and the challenges around that is universal in CCPT. It's absolutely not necessarily a sign of inexperience or poor practice. It is an ongoing challenge in our play therapy journeys. So that will always happen from time to time where you have clients where that opportunity to potentially feel like you need to give more detail comes up, and it's about how we navigate that. So let's talk a little bit about our ethical framework for practice, because this is really important to kind of ground us in our approach to delivering feedback to parents and caregivers. So it's very important that we are looking at who we are registered with in terms of our professional bodies, whoever that is for you in your field, and making sure that we are complying with those principles around confidentiality, informed consent, and parental involvement. There is also then, for Australia, Australians, another layer on top of that around what is the legislation or legal frameworks as well. So we have our ethical framework and our legal frameworks, especially when it comes to, say, the family law court system here in Australia. So we need to make sure that we are working holistically and with integrity of practice. And so always looking at both that ethical framework and that legal framework. It's also really important, I guess, in terms of our ethical communication, that it's both content and tone. So we know as professionals working in this space that largely communication is nonverbal, that actual communication or language that we use is only a small portion of that connection and relationship with parents. So when we are communicating this information to parents, we're conscious of the fact that it's not just our words, but how are we doing it? So I know when I'm meeting with parents, whether it's the first parent consult catch up or it's an ongoing, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, I'm still very much starting my conversations of those update parent consults with a genuineness, with an intentionality for connection at the beginning, with a deep respect and congruence in that space. So I'm connecting with them in the beginning to say, how are you doing? How are things going for you? I want to recognize that they are part of the system that I'm working with as well. And I want to give them a chance to be able to regulate themselves enough to begin that conversation, because sometimes those conversations are hard when we need to talk about some of the challenges that the child might be communicating to us in the playroom. We then need to use our framework to communicate that to parents. And sometimes parents are also struggling in their own lives outside of play therapy. And so we want to recognize all of that, all of the environmental and contextual factors when we then meet with them, either online or in person, to do our ongoing parent consults. So what do we ethically share? When we're talking about communicating to parents, we are very much covering the themes and stages of play in play therapy, in child-centered play therapy. So we are providing an update. We're providing progress updates. We're very much leaning into lots of different considerations for practice, including child development theory, attachment theory, trauma theory, ecological systems theory. We've got so many, right? So we are having that in the back of our minds, but in terms of that particular content, gearing it towards stages of play and the themes. So what I find, and what has been part of my practice more recently, and I hope that this is helpful for those of you listening who might be looking for tips, but where my practice has evolved now is that, as obviously as part of my work, after each play therapy session, I'm doing my case note and I'm noting the themes. And when I'm looking at them in terms of that update to parents, I'm looking at that consistency of those themes and really kind of the most important ones. So I might have, every child is different, but I might have 3 or 4 themes that I want to talk to parents about. I'm really conscious of the fact that I don't want to overload parents, and I really want to talk about the most important things, right? So I'm doing that in the beginning, but I'm using those themes more so as a launch pad to gain collaboration, discussion, conversation with the parent to connect what's happening in the playroom with outside. So I want to give you an example, and I might have given this before, so I apologize if I have. But I think one of those themes that we see in the playroom, say around learned helplessness. So we might tick that on our case notes from week to week and identify, yep, this is definitely something the child is struggling with in the playroom and needs support. So what do we do in the playroom when we see learned helplessness? We are using that skill. We have all sorts of skills, right? But one of those really great skills is returning responsibility. So we will be using that and applying that in our work with the child. So when I meet with the parent, I might say something to them like, what I have observed in the session since the last time we've caught up is this issue or this problem or this challenge around learned helplessness. So what do I mean by that, mum and dad? I mean that in the context of the work that I'm doing, I can see that for this child, they are really struggling to do things for themselves, and they are very often more so in coping with that, deferring responsibility to others. And then I say this next line, does that relate to your experience at home? Can you help me to kind of put context around that about if you've seen that outside of play therapy. So I'm very consciously and respectfully including them in the conversation around this theme or issue that I've identified in the playroom. So I don't need to go into the specifics of, Johnny keeps grabbing the Play-Doh can and can't open it and keeps asking me to do it. I'm not going into absolutely the description in the playroom in real time. I'm talking about this issue, and I do say that as a way of communicating the concept of themes, this issue or problem that the child is struggling with. And then I really want to launch pad it into gaining feedback from the parent, and then also using that as my strategies for follow-up homework and agreed outcomes and support. So you can see how just identifying that theme can have multiple functions for that parent consult update in terms of communicating feedback and progress. So I encourage you guys to potentially have a go at that. Look, it's really up to you, but that's been certainly something that I have really gravitated towards as a way of protecting the details of exactly what happens in the sessions. So that's one way of doing it. We definitely, in terms of what we would not share, is very much around play details, emotional expressions, or references to specific material. We want to make sure that we are talking holistically, generally, and in a summary type format. So it's very important that we emphasize and we gain informed consent from parents at the start of therapy. And in that initial consultation, we talk about the limits of confidentiality and what that looks like, both for outside of the playroom, but also in terms of our work with the child in the updates that we're going to provide. So we talk about what we will and won't share in those updates. So it's very helpful to certainly connect with your clinical supervisor to prepare yourselves for certain parent consultations. That really does, I think, in many cases, give you a framework for how to navigate, especially difficult parent consultations that you might have coming up, to review, obviously, ethical guidelines, your organisational policies and procedures, to make sure that you're maintaining confidence in communicating your boundaries, which is really, really important. So seeking supervision as well is something that you could potentially do in being able to access additional support. So I guess I want to offer a beginning reflection there, because I'm going to offer more at the end as well, about how clear are you about your own comfort zone when it comes to parent updates, and where might your own boundaries feel tested, which is a really interesting prompt, right? Where do we feel challenged in those parent consults? And where can we go to seek further support around that? So what are some ways that we can, I've talked about some initial ways that we can communicate progress, but let me give you some other ideas to add to your toolkit. So plan your sessions. So we, at my practice, have a template that has questions on it already as a prompt under each of those sections. So we talked about that in the previous episode around gaining feedback from parents first, then providing our own feedback in those themes and stages of play, and then having agreed outcomes and where to from here. So that's our structure of our template. And so then we are popping in there in advance, reviewing all of our notes, maybe seeking clinical supervision support as well, checking our professional guidelines, and then writing our notes for what we want to discuss. And I think having that structure and having those notes prepared in advance is a really great idea to help build your confidence. So if you are feeling a little bit stuck or challenged, you've got those notes to refer to. So definitely set some time aside before the parent consult to really put that on paper and document it. So we want to make sure that we are also framing progress in relation to developmental expectations. I lean into that a lot because I think sometimes parents can have expectations of their child's behavior that's outside of their developmental scope. We certainly are seeing that more and more for the children who were born during COVID, and I promise you guys I'm going to do an updated episode very soon on that and supporting that particular population of those 4 to 6 year olds, because it's very important that we are informed around what the research is telling us at the moment. So I will get to that, I promise. But very much so when we've got that population of 4 to 6 year olds, even more so, they are going to show potential indicators that they aren't matching what we would expect developmentally for their age. So we need to take that into consideration when we're talking about goal setting and progress and how progress should shift and change in your therapy sessions. We definitely want to use metaphors and very broad descriptors to make sure that we are describing the journey in a way that is protecting that content. We absolutely need to be committing to regular parent consult updates. I definitely find when I'm talking to supervisees, I'm reminding them of that sometimes if it has been something that has slipped for them. And again, people have different processes around how they do that. You might put a note in your calendar, or it might be that at school holiday periods for us here in Queensland or in Australia, it's at the end of every school term that school holidays occur. So that could be a good time as well to schedule some of those consults. So finding what works for you to make sure that you're regularly doing it, not just providing updates when things go wrong or things have escalated in the play. We need to have a intentionality of regularly connecting to involve parents in that process of change. We definitely want to invite them to collaborate. As I was talking about earlier in terms of the approach that I have, I think that's very important. We're aligning with our CCPT values of that congruence, empathy, and unconditional positive regard, which we offer to both the child and the parent or caregiver. That's super important. And how do we demonstrate those values? We invite them into the conversation. We ask for their collaboration. We stay curious about what we're seeing, because very, very often we are having a working hypothesis in the back of our minds, but we're constantly each session adding to that information to understand more about what the child is communicating to us. So it can shift and change as the child's work shifts and changes. So that collaboration and context and information of what's happening outside of play therapy is super helpful and super important. It's not the basis of our assessment, but it's definitely very useful. So making sure that we're inviting them into that collaboration is important. We want to normalize uncertainty as well, that children don't come with a prescribed number of sessions that they're going to do. They don't know how long their journey is going to be, and neither do we. So that uncertainty lives in the playroom. It lives in the playroom, it lives in our consults, and in ourselves, in our imposter syndrome, right? So if we feel like that imposter syndrome is rearing its head, sometimes that can be around the fact that we have felt that uncertainty or stuckness in the playroom. So it's definitely not linear. It's not going to be. Children don't fit into that box. So we are constantly communicating to parents those expectations to make sure that they are aware too. We keep written summaries concise. We're certainly looking at goals and reviewing goals every parent consult update and really highlighting the strengths of the child. Every case note, I am acknowledging and noting pro-social behaviours, because I truly believe in the capacity of the child and that self-actualization principle. So I'm always looking for those firsts. I'm looking for those glimmers. I'm looking for those positive connections and aspects of their play that show me the incredible side that they have as well. So definitely encourage you guys to be doing that, and always engaging in that reflective practice and making that intentional in your work as well. So I want to kind of summarize this, because as I said, this is part 3 and it's kind of ending, I guess, conversations for now. See how I did that? For those of you who practice CCPT, you'll know that well. We're going to bookend this for now, because it's very likely that we will have an episode in the future again about this topic, which I'm happy to do. So let's talk a little bit, I guess, around the summary of what we have been working on and talking about today. So I think what's super important at the end of the day is that I want to reassure you, for those of you listening in the trenches of play therapy, CCPT, and working with parents and maybe feeling those challenges, that ultimately at the end of the day, as with everything in CCPT, it is all about relationships first. It's about relationships. It's about connection. It's about feeling respect, congruence, that unconditional positive regard, empathy, and really that attunement between yourself and the parent or caregiver. So if you're not feeling that way, that's a really interesting and important aspect of your practice to kind of reflect on and dig a little deeper around what's happening in that scenario, because certainly our intention as CCPT practitioners is to connect and build that attunement and relationship and attachment with the parent or caregiver along with the child. So certainly very much acknowledging that our work is primarily with the child, but we want to have that connection relationship with parents where they feel seen and heard as well. Very important. Ethics should guide what we share and how we share it. So we've talked a lot about in terms of our framework and those concepts of themes and stages of play, which we've talked about in previous episodes as well. So check that out if you need. But very much looking at that summary perspective of what we're sharing and making sure in the way that we're communicating and the way that we're practicing that we are following our ethical guidelines. Super important. And certainly that reflective preparation, both by ourselves, preparing our notes, having a plan before you start, and seeking that support from your clinical supervisor is also really, really helpful to help navigate that. So I definitely encourage you guys to try journaling or that supervision reflection exercises in your supervision sessions, because it certainly will only enhance your practice. And I want to leave you with, I guess, a closing reflection, because I'm actually keeping to time today, you guys. This is amazing. I've done it. So I want to leave you with a reflection, I guess, that will get you thinking about how you navigate this now and in the future. What do I want parents to walk away understanding about CCPT? I think that kind of gets to the heart of the challenge for us in being able to communicate something that is deeply relational experience between the therapist and the child, but also recognizing that importance of parents feeling updated and understanding progress along the way, as they should. So how do we navigate that? And how do we leave a parent understanding more about CCPT than when we started? So I want to offer that particular reflection to you guys, or question for reflection. So I have a final sort of comment here that I want to share that I hope also helps to summarize what we've talked about today. So our words carry weight, not just with parents, but with the children who trust us to hold their stories. Let's keep finding ways to communicate progress that honors both. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your support and for being here. We are on all the socials now, you guys. So we are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We have an email address now if you'd like to get in touch with us, hello@playtherapycircle.com. We are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and now YouTube. So you'll be able to see this episode on YouTube as well. So please feel free to check us out at the Play Therapy Circle. I am so grateful to each of you for listening, for still being here and following along. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Be kind to yourselves and look after each of you and yourself. And I will see you guys next week for another amazing episode as always. So thank you so much. Take care. Big love. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Play Therapy Circle. If anything resonated with you today, I'd love it if you could follow the podcast, share it with a colleague, or leave a short review. It really helps others find our circle. And if you have a topic or question you'd love me to explore, I'd love to hear from you. This space is for you, and I want it to feel like a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you belong here.